and welcome to this episode of the Conversation of Our Generation, where we are solving the problems of today with the wisdom of the past. My name is Nick Jamel, the creator and host of the podcast and the blog, conversationofourgeneration.com, and I'm excited to welcome to the podcast today, the Aureus Press. We will have Brendan on from over there to talk a lot about really a wide range of different topics, all facing our culture today, and really how we need to go. He talks a lot about going back to the old ways of thinking and recovering those. And I think we dive in a lot because obviously, here the tagline is solving problems of today with the wisdom of the past. And he's doing a great job of bringing out the beauty, the wisdom, and so many other different things that we've at least started to leave behind in the past, and is bringing those out and talking about some of the things that we need in our culture today to really support the arts, the institutions that build up culture, philosophy, etc., and push back against some of the attacks we have that are being mounted by people in our culture today to undermine and to fraction and to try to sow divisiveness and really kind of the postmodernist socialist ideas that we see cropping up, especially here in America, and also with Brendan being a Canadian who moved to Ireland, really getting a different perspective that's outside the American, black hole that we have of news from outside the world, and just getting a different perspective than someone who's in it all the time. And so it's a really great interview. He's a very smart and interesting person. So I definitely think you need to listen to this whole interview and check out more of what he's doing with the Aureus Press. And you can find out more about that as well if you just go on Twitter and look for, just search the Aureus Press, ARU. Now I'm having trouble with this. I'm going to pull that up, but you will find it in the show notes as well. And you can check it out there. But it is ARUEUS is how you spell Aureus Press. And he's at TradWest Art with underscores there. So you can check that out as well, or go to the show notes to find that. And definitely, I recommend you do follow him and see what he's got going on. And so with that, let's hop into the interview. Thanks, Brendan, for joining me today at the Conversation of Our Generation. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, thanks for asking me.
Yeah, it's great. And so for all those of my listeners who don't know who you are, who don't know about the Aureus Press, why don't you give a little bit of a background on who you are and what the work is over at the Aureus Press?
Right. Well, I'm just this guy, and I wrote a book about modern art because it was plaguing me, haunting me, and I got all my thoughts out about it, and then I self-published it, and I thought, well, I have to grift this book, so I took to social media to start posting about it and the ideas in it, and that's really where it started. And then I started writing articles on interests of mine related to that topic, but not entirely. Everything I do is related sort of one way or another. It might be hard to explain how, but I think I can actually. But I started writing articles for sort of like, Classical Wisdom Weekly and some different places. And that was fine. But I sort of found that I felt like every time they would edit them and kind of butcher them. And I started getting annoyed by that. And I thought, well, why don't I just put it up myself? Like, what's the difference? I've got enough following on social media. I can kind of push the stuff myself. So I made my own website for just publishing my own essays and essays of people that I agree with, or, agree with me. So that was the Aureus Press idea, just to do that and just be like my own, not media company, or not influencer either, but my own, just sort of to push my own ideas exactly the way I want, let's say, which you can do with these platforms and things, with your own website and social media. So that was it, really.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's really a good way to, promote a book. I've definitely been looking into finishing up and writing some more longer form things and getting a book out there. So what was the self-publishing? I didn't actually know that about you. What was that process like, getting it published yourself?
Oh, anybody can do it now. It's quite easy on the Amazon. If you just publish the book and create the PDF, you just put it up there and they'll make it to order. So, it's easy. Anybody can do it. Yeah, that part's cool. Yeah. So if you got a good book idea, you can then you just got to sell it yourself. See, that was the thing. I was actually approached by a publisher. There was two publishers at different times, and the first one sort of, I I don't want to say, there was someone you would have heard of, let's say, that offered to publish it, that since kind of vanished. But even then, and then with the second publisher, I was like, well, because I looked at this publisher and I saw how they I won't say who they are, but how they promote their books, generally just through social media, and they actually had less of a following than I did already. So I thought, well, what are they going to do that I can't do myself? And I even asked the guy, frankly, like, what can you do for me that I can't already do? And he's like, well, really, it's just the name, to be able to say that you have a publisher, and then they take like a much larger cut than you would get just doing it yourself on Amazon as well. So, so I bypassed all that, and
Yeah, it's one thing to have a publisher when you get an advance and they, give you an agent and take you around on a book tour. They're just listing it on Amazon.
I don't think I'll be getting that from anybody. But yeah. No, that's right. Like a big time publisher. Yeah, no, I was never in that league.
No, I get that, but yeah, if they're just kind of, I interviewed another author, and that seemed like that to me. Like they were just kind of like, yeah, we printed the book for you, and now go market it yourself. And I'm like, well, how much did that actually help you then at that point? But
yeah, it's great. Yeah, and you can make you make a lot more per copy, a lot more than you would with a publisher per copy. So from what I understand, anyways. So it was good. I recommend it if you can do it.
That's awesome. Well, and for those who don't know about the Aureus Press, what are some of the things that you post about on there?
There's all sorts of things. There's sort of paganism, Platonism, Hermeticism, lots about art and antiquity, classicism, problems plaguing the modern world, let's say. There's some fiction, what we call solar fiction, that me and my partner are working on, and some other fiction I'm working on myself. Actually, my second book will be fiction. And so anything that it all ties together with, let's say, archaic revival, which is not a term I created. That was coined by I think Terence McKenna, which is he was interested, as I would be, in a revival of archaic thinking, of viewing the world. In that, and even in the future prospects, someone else who's the author, Archaeofuturism. Is that what it's called? Is that by Benoit? I forget now.
I'm not sure.
I never read it, but I know he had this idea, and it sounded like something I would agree with as well. But reviving certain archaic values that I believe modernity sort of masks poorly, that are unavoidable and true, and better to be honest about them, even though they can sometimes sound kind of harsh and strange to the modern ear. But that would be the undercurrent of it. That sort of, especially tying in with even going to, paganism is part of it. It's not by any means anti-Christian or anything like that, but it's all about exploring the very old ways of viewing things. Just because I believe that, like I said, that we have to get back to that to a certain degree, if we can. I don't know. I'm not sure if we even can. If anything, we're going to just keep changing and have a whole new way of thinking, which is probably true as well. But I believe there's what you call the traditionalist. What I prefer to say now, essentialist, because traditionalism has become associated with certain things that it sounds a bit silly now, I think. But it is that true. The undercurrent of life is very much, there's so many illusions in the modern techno world that distract you from these truths, and in an unhealthy way, let's say. How else can I explain what goes on there? But that's more or less, that would be, if I had to give it a foundation of any kind, that would be it. But there's all kinds of loose things I throw in there that are just like my personal tastes, which I can very cleverly excuse and say, this ties all, and to me it does all tie in together. I believe it confuses some people, some of my interests, because I'll talk about like heavy metal or things like this. But to me, it all makes sense.
Yeah.
But it's not easy to explain.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting, because I think that traditionalist, I don't know, whatever that is, that trying to hold on, those people who are out there trying to hold on to tradition, it's hard to exactly explain what all it is that is valuable in that, what all it is that you are trying to hold on to. But you recognize that value. And I think that it's just in recognizing the value where it is with what, I mean, like I see you post like old movies, even like the kind of classic Hollywood and stuff like that. There's kind of something to it that was a better form of art than what we have today in the movies, I would say. And I saw
Yeah.
someone talking, I just saw a conversation on Twitter as I was like about The Godfather, and they're like, I can't even watch. They were saying that it was a boring movie because it just had that slow, older pace like the movies did then versus now when every movie is, M. Night Shyamalan and like just create or like who does Transformers? I can't think of his name and did
Oh,
but
Michael Bay, was it?
yeah, yes, Michael Bay, like those kinds of like just big like constant in your face action and graphics.
Yeah,
Like we're just so
totally
used
empty,
to
totally
that.
soulless. Yeah, yeah. So it
Yeah,
must have been a very young person, obviously, that had grown up on the very new stuff, is it? And they couldn't cope with. They couldn't just sit through it. Yeah, attention spans have suffered, that's for sure.
Mhm.
But yeah, there's like say even things like that, even movies that aren't that old, like say even from the '80s or something. I can find as long as there's for real art, you have to have a certain honesty,
Mhm.
which is absolutely killed by this our modern way of sort of political correctness and all the various layers of taboos that have to be avoided, and the whole system of making film nowadays is just committee after committee deciding and making sure everything is rinsed and absolutely all the original core kernel raw idea becomes sort of is just killed with platitudes and avoiding anything dangerous, which takes all the guts and joy out of it and the whole thing. So you
Mhm.
have to have this raw honesty, be willingness to have that honesty and put your heart in your sleeve to have a real art. So I can find that in, I mean, there's still the odd thing you can find that's new, very, very less and less all the time, I think.
Mhm.
But in many ways, real creative stuff has moved purely online. You can still get a lot of kicks out of just like social media and memes and like, these kind of conversations. More
Mhm.
so than ever, there's like writing and talk. Let's say I like movies are almost, I can't even watch a new movie. Like it's
Mhm.
generally I will at some point be insulted, intellectually insulted, or like outright insulted.
Yeah.
And I whatever, like very rarely, unless I've heard from a few people that it's good. I won't even bother.
Mhm.
So it's like the medium, things can die. Like the world and life and everything evolves and changes in totally unexpected ways. I know that much. And
Mhm.
things come and go that you would never expect. Like no one 200 years ago you couldn't even explain the internet to them, let alone, that it would take over everything and the way things change, right? So one thing is that life will surprise you and you'll lose things you never thought you could lose, and you'll have new things that you won't be aware of having until they're gone. Uh, you know, so
Mhm.
I don't feel like all depressed, like I want to kill myself or anything over the way things are. In terms of visual art and films and music, these things are like, I feel like they're dying for our eyes if they're not dead already, like in many, many ways. I know that a lot of people would disagree, but a lot of things are being stifled unnecessarily and artificially.
Mhm.
And I don't think it has to be that way. Like I said, it could be just like inescapable evolution and things are going to change, but I'm not so sure. I don't know. Maybe that's the case. But either way, I can see when there's false things and when things are going badly, let's say, and when it's good to lash out at it. And in my own way, I can do it quite creatively. Like I have more creative, artistic in me in things I do, like attacking these people, than they do in producing their crap. I think maybe that's arrogant of me, but whatever. Who cares?
Yeah.
So, yeah,
It's interesting. Yeah, I do. I wonder if there's a sense that you can't have really good art in the postmodern idea. Like, if truth is all relative, if there isn't, you kind of mentioned that honesty is what makes art, and I think that that's something that for me, with music, is what separates. Like I enjoy old country music and Johnny Cash and Willie Nelson, people like that.
oh
And I
yeah,
even enjoy and I love Billy Joel. Like I like new. I don't just listen to like classical music. I do think there's something more to Beethoven than to those popular artists. But I think that there's something that they had, and there's still artists today that I think are pretty good sometimes that pop up here and there. But just so many are just manufactured. Like
yeah,
I think that that is, and if they're not, they very quickly become that after they get their first album hits, and that's unique to them and very different, and then they get big and have to make this manufactured type music. I
yeah, yeah.
wonder if that's kind of what it is that we don't value that honest expression and a seeking of truth that I think that uh, so many artists throughout all time really have done. That's really what it was about, was not just beauty but truth and honesty as well.
Yeah, and to have like they don't have any cultural support anymore to be to do it for real. There's no support, like, you know, to have a real, like to have a Michelangelo or a Beethoven, and or even like, you know, a Black Sabbath, or, you know, they have to have some kind of a culture that supports them so they can see a metric of success financially and otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, there's not, everything is against them now, really, unless you're, you know, like obese and twerking with a flute or something, like, and that's like, that sounds like a joke, but really, everything will be against you. And so there's, you know, the incentives aren't there. And like someone like I said, say a Beethoven, you know, he has to have to be that level, at that level of excellence. You have to have, the entire culture has to support you every step of the way. There has to be no doubt. It has to be absolutely confident in itself, the culture. And, you know, because there's an amount of labor that goes into becoming that good, and to work on that all day long like that. It needs to be absolutely nurtured in every possible way from everything around him. So that's, none of that is there anymore. Everything's everything's sort of dissipating. So it's not that people can't break out if they can find little ways to be devoted to something and do it their own way. Like, even say what I'm doing with Aureus Press. I'm not saying I'm like a Beethoven, Jesus, but like, at least I can sort of do my own thing my own way, at least for now, until I get, like, maybe I could be deplatformed for not being PC enough or something. But I don't know. I don't think so. I'm not that, you know, dangerous, I don't think. But what was I saying? But yeah, so that's it. Without the cultural support, that's the other thing. That, like, no wonder they sell it, because everything will be against them. If they're doing something for real, everything will work against you, I think, unless it's unless the goal of what you're doing is part of these modern sort of downward going cultural platitudes towards generally egalitarianism and so forth, you know. Yeah, and even then, I don't know, is there support? There's no support for anything unless it's like that sort of modern R&B stuff, or like gangster rap or something, I think. Maybe they don't even have support anymore. I don't know. I'm completely like out of like modern culture in many ways. I've stopped following a lot of it for like a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't even know what's going on anymore. I know if I go to the shops, I hear this music and it's worse than ever, and I'm like, oh my god. Like, I can remember the day they didn't play it in the shops, first of all, let alone when I'm like, you know, I'm buying some milk and then the old lady beside me is singing along to, like, you know, Wet Ass Pussy or whatever it is. It's like, holy fuck. Sorry, maybe I shouldn't swear. Sorry.
You're good. You're fine. I can mark this episode as explicit. But we're good. But no, I think that that's true. But I also think that there's kind of that old idea of the starving artist too. I mean, for a lot of time, there were people who didn't have support, though, that just kind of trudged forth and made greatness happen. I mean, amazing, especially in writing, I think is a big place where you see it. Obviously, I think
Especially
music,
in what?
in writing,
Oh,
you know,
writing. Yeah.
writers, I think, kind of had, like, Poe died in the uh in the gutter, drunk at like 40 something, basically penniless. So many writers, I think.
I
And
think he had some fame. I think he just drank it away, and he was
he did
depressive in
fame, but
his
he was
case.
also,
There was others that died with no fame, like Lovecraft. He was even more of a sad story. I think he didn't really get any success till after he died. That's true, but it's not quite the same either. It's like, you know, you could be a Lovecraft, you could be at that level now, and maybe you could have some success. Maybe you could, with the online and like self-publishing and so forth. But it's not like, just in general, like, there was nothing. He had Weird Tales magazine, at least. There's nothing even like that now. Like, there's no kind of avenues for artistic expression that are coherent, that are widely agreed on, because everything is bifurcating and disagreeing more and more, and nothing's coming together. Everything is kind of melting. So I just think I'd have to think about it harder to put it into words, let's say, but I think this scenario is different, and it'd be harder, even those examples, guys like Lovecraft and painters, you know, all artists that weren't famous in their time until afterwards. I just think they won't even be famous afterwards now.
mm-hmm.
I could be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'd have to think about that one.
Fair. That's fair. And so, as we're kind of talking about the culture, I think it's, good to get a different perspective, because you said you're over in Ireland, so that's also a different perspective as well. I think
Yeah.
most of my listeners, actually, I know most of my listeners are here in the United States, and basically, we only ever see things from the United States perspective. We don't actually know what's happening in the world generally, most people.
Mhm.
But what are some things that you see? I think that you see in the culture that are problems that we're facing at large, not just here but all around.
Well, I live in most Western countries are really America these days. To different degrees, but they're following or going along with following in that shadow, let's say. So, many things would be similar to what you would be experiencing, I think. It's not quite as crazy, but it's pretty crazy in some ways, a lot of ways. People are more subdued here, like they're sort of, it's not like in America where people brashly speak their minds and, which is great. They don't have the spirit of individualism here. Exactly. They have more of a conformist kind of culture.
Mm-hmm.
I know maybe that sounds strange, but they do in a lot of ways. Sort of like Sweden.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there's pros and cons to that. They'd be more social. They'd be more traditional. But they do more sort of go along to get along, and they wouldn't like to make a fuss about things. So yeah, it's different, but I mean, it's totally different. It's been there's still things that surprise me and I'm not used to. And, I still learn or find ways of viewing the world that I didn't realize that are different for them than the way I was raised. But yeah, it's interesting. All right. But yeah, we're all living in America to different degrees at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So it may not be so different.
That's
It's
true.
similar. Yeah. Like there's a good folk music. There's a folk culture here still that's quite alive. Like in literature, there's a lot of people that believe in the fairies, and there's a lot of folk music still that's very still strong.
Mm-hmm.
And what else? Certain traditions. This be like traditional stone wall building would be popular,
Mm-hmm.
and certain things that may have like nearly all but vanished in America and other places that are still going. So there's a strong tradition still going on here. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not sure if I answered your question. Did I miss something out of your question?
I guess, yeah, just kind of diving into maybe some of the particular problems facing the culture at large, I guess.
Particular problems. Yeah. See, Ireland, in many ways, is like the place I left, which is Canada, which is a place with a larger neighbor that very much influences it that they hate. So a lot of their culture is based on proving they're not English, the same way Canadians continually try to prove they're not American, while being at the same time, in many ways, not indistinguishable, but very similar. So there's a kind of strange scenario there that leads to all kinds of other problems.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all I'll say about that, I guess. But
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do think that Ireland has. I have a bunch of family in Ireland. My grandpa has like 144 first cousins over there, so I've been to visit, and the one place I never got to go was my uncle Willie's house in Donegal, and he basically had like a house. It was kind of like a hobbit hole, like it's built into a hill sort of, and it sloped, and just like he didn't have a telephone until the year 2000. He
great.
Yeah, and it was just like really like, I mean, like walking back in time from what I heard to go see it. Like my dad's like, it looked like a house. I mean, I think it was a rather old house he lived in his whole life, and he was an old man. So
Yeah.
it's, I mean, I think that there is still a lot of, uh, I think there's more to hold on to if you're looking for traditionalism. Like America is just such a young country and was kind of founded in a way that's very revolutionary and always kind of, we moved west. We're always moving and going forward. Whereas I think some of those European countries do have an advantage on kind of maintaining some sort of cultural identity that just because they have such an uh, old heritage, really.
Yeah, and it's actually surprises you, but you can feel it all around you, to be honest. And yeah, even in the landscape, it seems just old and sacred, I guess you might say. Like even there's a hill walk very close to here. We did it like a lot, and there's a at the top of it there's like a remnant of sort of a ring fort in the middle of the hill. you can go in and there's a bunch of stones, and there's a big stone in the middle with concentric circles carved in it. Just this image of eternity. And it's very ancient. I forget how old it is exactly, but I remember there's an altar of stones near to it as you go past it, and it looks so, it's like something out of a Hammer horror movie. It's like just perfect, like pagan altar. Oh yeah, someone was sacrificed on, like the sort of Stonehenge, rocks put together with the flat one on top, like at waist level, so you can like lay on it. But and I thought, so me and my friend always actually assumed it was like one of these 19th century romantic things they put in and claimed it to be ancient, but no, it actually turns out it is from like thousands of years ago.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
So yeah, things like this, like all the time. Like you might just be in town leaning against a wall, and it's like from, even just like it was right beside me, there's a castle that was built in what was it, 700, I think it was first built. So that's a long time ago.
Yeah, that is.
And there's actually, underneath the castle, there's a system of tunnels. You're not allowed to go in them now because it's dangerous, but I believe they're still working, that go all across this part of the city, like really, really far. And they were like where they would sort of bring in or smuggle in or just bring in food and stuff. And like there's a network, a spider web of tunnels under the ground everywhere here from this castle.
That's wild.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's pretty cool though.
Hmm.
And so to kind of, I think that one thing that we are facing is, as a problem, is just not having the ability to create the art that we used to be. Like, I've seen so many pictures of like when something breaks on an old church, and then they just like mess up the face of the statue when they recreate it. And I think I've seen you post some of that, but I've seen other people posting about it as well. And it's, how do we fix that issue? I mean, is there a way to get real craftsmen who can actually repair and create that kind of beauty and restore what's old as well?
Well, there are people that can do it properly, and there are few and far between, and you have to pay properly for it. So they're not willing. Those people that did that were looking for a cheap solution, or I don't know. Some of those are so bad. I actually wonder if they weren't intentionally messed up, like they're against the church or whatever, or something. Because it's so miserably bad. They weren't restorers of any kind at all. But it's either that, or just like they've paid somebody next to nothing who knows nothing.
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine which or why. It seems to happen a lot in Spain. It seems to be a real problem there. But there are people that can do it. But really, like I said, regarding the Beethoven and the requiring a culture working in unison to create truly high art, it's not, the culture has to find an importance in, it has to have proper beauty values, which we've lost because modernism teaches you that, art is about being intellectually shocking and being ugly on purpose and stupid stuff like this. It's just all, nonsense. So you've lost that. You've lost even beauty values, presently. So you can't just say, you can't implement standards of beauty, let's say, because someone will say, oh, you can't tell me what I like and don't like, or, everything, like that's this whole relativism, which has aided and caused this dissipation of things where no one can come together and, there's no standard, let's say. So also in my book, I say the guilds. We lost the guilds, which was a major art, powerhouse all through the ages, back into the time of Rome and beyond. They were there until the 19th century. They were replaced by corporations. So the middleman could make more money, basically. But the guilds had a sacred, esoteric training system. Everyone that joined, you'd have, you could be in the painting guild or the shoemaker guild or the flute playing guild or whatever, and there'd be the master at the top and the students all the way down. And it was generational. Everything was handed down there. Everything was codified, I guess, religiously, and there was no doubt about their aesthetics and their cultural unity. And it was still commercial as well. But all that was abandoned when we went into corporations and mass production. So, some people say you can't fight against mass production. It's inevitable. I'm not so sure about that, but that's actually secondary to the ethos of modernism as an art philosophy, which really destroyed standards in visual art, because it's not just the mass produced items, it's everything. It's like the architecture and anything like that now has to have this silly gimmick to it and this goofy intentional kind of ugliness, these obtuse shapes and things. So
Yeah.
That's what I would
I
say.
I wonder if there's a way to. I almost feels like it almost feels like there's not to kind of have that set standards of beauty in this culture. I mean, I know that obviously with the relativism and the postmodernism, but even moving past that, with just kind of, I think it requires a more local focus to have that. Because the reason why guilds and things like that could work is you weren't competing with Chinese companies and American companies and all that. You were basically just working to serve the people in your area. And
But that's true, but it wasn't entirely like that. Like the word journeyman comes from guilds.
mhm,
They would send an apprentice out into the world to go to another country. He'd go on a journey to learn what they're doing and bring back information. So that wasn't totally cut off in that way, but it was very parochial. You would have the style, you would have the guild that worked in their style. This is our, our land, the way we do things, and they were famous for it, and they perfected it.
mhm.
So it's parochial in that sense, but it wasn't totally like cut off either.
Yeah, but they weren't
Sorry to interrupt.
competing the same way companies do now. Like you
No,
know what I mean? Like the
well now they compete on bargains. It's everything now is just it only matters, and no one even cares about anything but the middleman, which is the profiteering of the guy in charge of the mass production and the distribution. It only matters is how cheaply he can make it and distribute it, and what bargain someone can get at Walmart. That's the only tier remaining. No one cares what it looks like. They barely even care if it works now. It'll be some cheap Chinese crap that'll break like within a week.
Yep.
So it's all the I know you're into marketing, which is fine. No, economics is a necessity, but it's completely taken over to a ridiculous point where
Mhm.
there's that's what I
I
would say.
I do I do agree with that. I think that there is a pushback though for quality. I mean, I've seen it here where, at like with food, I think is a big thing. I talked about this in one of my interviews recently, but when I was growing up in Indianapolis here, you pretty much had the choice between big restaurant chains and like the couple like local North Side Catholic bar pub type places that
Mhm.
we had. And now it's tremendously opening up for many, many more like kind of little breweries and little local uh, restaurants that are just locally owned and do a pretty good job and not. And so I think that there is a willingness and an urge for quality and not just big chains. There's kind of this anti corporatist, and I think that it's changing. And also, the like Amazon, I think, while it's got its problems, does allow people who are out there doing interesting things and creating things, or Etsy, places like that. Some of those platforms do allow for real kind of well made crafts, and that stuff can kind of resurge. And I think there are people who want that. Obviously, those companies are doing, Etsy, for instance, is doing very well, I assume.
Yeah,
So,
and I use Amazon obviously. Yeah. Everything has its pros and cons, I guess.
mhm,
But that's what I mean earlier when I said it might be a matter of on an evolutionary scale, certain things have just had their time and they're gone
mhm,
in terms of what can be practically done.
mhm.
And there's other ways to be creative if you watch out for them.
Yeah, I think we tried to fill kind of the God-shaped hole in our culture that came after that we realized because of Nietzsche, with this big corporate, like we just wanted to make material wealth be, fill that and distract us. And I think that we're realizing as cultures are breaking down a little bit that that doesn't work. You can't just turn away from the big questions and, turn into the TV and just that'll make you happy. It just doesn't.
Yeah, and people are getting more aware of it, but I'm not sure you can really stop it at this point.
Mhm.
It's got a lot of impetus. It's based on lies, and there's a tremendous lie at work. But it has pushed and rolled along because the average person now seems to me so fearful. They lash out angrily at anything that disrupts their routine, even though surely they're noticing how sort of cheap and slovenly everything gets more so every day. Especially as they get older and sort of they can see it and notice it in their lives. But I don't know. I'm not sure there's anything you can do about it. Like I often think, I don't know if so. There has to be some sort of cataclysm that kind of shakes things up a bit, whatever it might be. Um, or how far things can go down the way they're going until we're literally like living in pods, or it's like the Matrix or something, and you're just You sit in a pod plugged in and just don't do anything.
I hope we don't get to that point.
No, we're not too far off from it, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's hard to say, but it feels like the average person is very invested in modern living, even though I can know that they sort of hate it at the same time. But it's very strange. I can't, like, people that might talk like you and I and sort of notice it and be interested in talking about it, like, to a lot of people this would be very unsettling, and just, even some of the most things I or you might have said already that seem just like basic and fine, they would just like freak out and be like, what are you saying?
Hmm.
And I don't understand them at all, to be honest with you. There seems to be a lot of fear. I feel like there's a lot of fear in society,
Hmm.
fear and anxiety rising.
Yep.
So, I mean, I don't know what's going to happen, but
Mhm.
feels like we're due a bit of a disaster.
Yeah, it feels like that too. I just feel like people don't like the way modernity is, but they also, it's very easy to just, work your job, go home, watch Netflix, and scroll through Twitter. Like it's just an easy thing to do. And while they know, I think a lot of people realize that it's not healthy, that it's not good for you,
Mm.
they also don't know how to not. It's kind
Mm.
of like a drug. It's like an addiction, and I think that we have a lot of, and I find myself being pulled into Twitter too. I mean, obviously, I'm on Twitter a lot. People who follow me see me tweeting a lot,
Yeah, me too.
but I think that um, there's I think we just are kind of weak in general. I don't think that we're any stronger than like my great grandparents or grandparents who, you know, my grandparents would have been after the depression, but my great grandparents who would have gone through that, who really, I mean, my mom's side, they like, my great grandma came here from Ireland as like a 14-year-old girl or 15-year-old girl and was an indentured servant for several years and to get by. It like,
Yeah.
what 15-year-old kid is going to do something like that today in the
Well,
West?
maybe soon they'll learn what. Maybe soon it will be like that again.
Mm-hmm.
But see, I would say, I don't have, say, a problem with like the likes of Twitter. A lot of people complain about it and they find it depressing and they think it leads to, it is addictive. There's no doubt it's addictive. At the same time, I feel like I've learned a lot through Twitter and it was one of the better ways I found to sort of network and say sell the book or the Aureus Press stuff. And I don't, but like Netflix would be a whole other thing. Like even like I don't mind watching TV or movies as per se. It depends what it is, and Netflix is such a pile of garbage. All this, like 98% of it is such insulting crap, like let alone like cuties and all this kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's so bad, and it doesn't. Your entertainment at home doesn't necessarily have to be so vile and stupid like that. At least on Twitter, you have choices ranging very far on content you want to ingest, and knowledge you might want to get, and people you might want to connect with. I think it's different. I know it's disparaged a lot, but I don't have a huge problem with it.
No, I agree. I do think it's a great place to put ideas out there, and that's kind of why I don't consider it as bad. But if you are the person who is not putting, like, who just kind of mindlessly scrolls through
Oh yeah.
garbage, right? I think that that's, if I use it to keep up on, I follow political people and see what they're talking about, and just kind of know what's going on there. I follow interesting accounts like you and some of the others that post about beauty and art and architecture,
Yeah.
and I find a lot of, I do learn a lot that way and connect with interesting people. But yeah, I think that there is kind of, I think Facebook might be worse, or
It is. Lately, Facebook has somehow gotten better again. Don't ask me how or why, but I go back there sometimes. It's still like a pain. It's more of a pain than ever because they've made it really like clunky and slow. Like trying to make it fancy, they've really, like, I think, screwed it up. But there's still a lot of strange esoteric groups and things that you can join and get into, and almost more so than Twitter. Lately, I've been noticing. I've been going back there and thinking, wow, there's some interesting stuff going on here. But and that's a different matter altogether. But like, in my point of view, these things are not inherently bad. Like I said, even the likes of Netflix, as long as they like would produce some decent content that wasn't just trying to brainwash you into slavery or God knows what. I don't know what they're doing. But if you had all this in even this techno edifice, I mean, that's fine. But then at the very least, they should also be doing the really exciting stuff, like going and we should have bases orbiting Jupiter by now. Things like this, like real future stuff. So I wish they'd really get on that, but it seems like they're this is the really depressing thing, is they have the veneer of a futuristic society, which is just this kind of consumerist plastic bubble, and they don't actually do the heroic stuff, because what's the point? Because they're so mechanistic and mercantile, and they're like, well, why waste the money? And we're fine. We'll just stay here, kind of thing. I think. Don't ask me what they're thinking or what. At least we got guys like Elon Musk and so forth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I'm all for that kind of future hard exploration, not just space, but all sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like he's only one guy. Whatever happened to NASA? Like, what do they do now?
Nothing. They still probably collect a very sizable budget.
Yeah, I mean, obviously corrupt and just do nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So everything's very tenuous, and there's a lot of dangerous things happening that could destroy all of civilization. I mean, in none of these scenarios, I talk about these, disasters and apocalyptic things. I consider myself a Platonist, and I have a very stoic view of things, and I always seem to have fun no matter what's going on. I mean, I'm sure if I was thrown in prison in a gulag and like beaten every day, I would be like moaning, but I just think you can find the good in anything. So even if we just descended into a barbaristic dark age, I would just like live like a freebooter and become savage.
Yep. I kind of have the same thing. I'm very cataclysmic in the way I talk about things. I'm like, they're always, it's always going to be the worst case scenario. But I also have an optimism that no matter what comes, I've had good times and bad times, and I've still found a way to enjoy life through all of that. And I think that if you can kind of take that attitude, then
we're powerless. We're powerless for most of it, really. I mean, we can only affect so much. I tried with in terms of art, visual art, I tried my little bit to complain about it. I thought I've had people tell me that I changed their view on it and stuff. So I didn't do nothing, let's say.
Yeah, exactly. That's awesome. Well, and so you mentioned earlier that you moved from Canada to Ireland. What was it that prompted you to make that move? I'm curious, or you don't have to tell me if it's.
No, it's fine.
And
like literally, how can I put this? I was like, let's say I had a girl I was living with in Canada, and that went badly, and it was like I was already getting like, I knew that I wanted like a traditional family and so forth, let's say. So I wasn't seeming to be finding that, but these sort of feminists and that were available to me at that time. And having come here in my youth and having a visa for Ireland, I remembered it being different in that way. So I sort of had an idea, which is the way it turned out, that I would come here and like find a wife, basically. No, because that's not entirely true, because I didn't know what I was doing. Like that's the way it panned out or whatever. But I didn't actually intend to, I always intended to go back. It's not going to happen now, but I did intend to go back for a long time. But I stayed because I wound up getting married, let's say. So, and I like it. Just every place has its pros and cons. So I'm happy enough to be here. Like I got good friends here now, so that's fine. But yeah, it was prompted by that breakup with that girl, and just like thinking, after like living together for 4 years and all this, and just being fed up with the way that life was going there, and I decided to take a working holiday and come over. And I actually went around to that was my big chance to go to Paris, see the Louvre, and I went and saw many of the art storehouses of the continent before I settled here. But even then, it's strange and convoluted, because I think back and I think those are the reasons. But then when I really think about it, I think the only reason I came to Ireland was like to visit my aunties. I didn't really think I would stay here. But anyways, that's the way it worked out.
That's interesting.
I left Canada for that reason. I was in like a state of disgust of sorts.
I think that's interesting, because I told the story earlier of my great grandma coming here, but I think that if more people would just kind of pick up and move, or pick up and like take those types of chances when you're saying, hey, I'm not happy here. I think that's awesome that you recognize that and obviously settled in Ireland, which is a beautiful country. So.
Yeah. Many good things about it. I mean, it rains a lot, and like I do miss the seasons. I miss like the big mountains and lakes in British Columbia. That was good.
Mm-hmm.
But You just have to, everything, life is always like that.
For sure.
Pros and cons.
That's awesome though. And so as far as some of, I guess, kind of wrapping up, getting closer here to the end,
Yeah.
are there any sort of final thoughts that you have that you wanted to share, or any kind of, I guess, making your last pitch for your ideas and what you would want people to take away overall?
Well, last pitch for my ideas. My ideas are a strung together list of my interests, let's say, conglomerated around a certain idea that makes sense to me. It doesn't always seem to make sense to a lot of people. But then a lot of people can find that the links work out. But it's, like I said, it's related to archaic, ancient philosophical thinking, as far as I can understand it, and even like pre-Christian thinking, let's say. And my ideas and attitude about art and how modernism is kind of just a trick and a bad turn, because that just not just affects art in the end, but it leads to other things and all the various lies of the modern world that seem to be unhealthy and, could be fixed. I don't think they will be fixed. They'll be fixed once they degenerate from their own hopelessness, let's say. But how can I put it? We often, like I said, we often call it like solar, in the fiction, we call it solar writing and solar ideas, but it's to do with embracing ideas that are from the previous time, that are sort of heroic, related to courage and sacrifice, and not ignoring history or hating history. And a lot of it is very classical. It comes to me and like people I work with from reading classical texts, a lot of it, and I'm coming closer to their way of thinking, same way that happened during the Renaissance. Mm-hmm. Not to say we're on any par with anybody like that, but it is to do with that. Mm-hmm. So it's just sort of, it's familiar but anti-modern, it's fun, and it's true. I believe what I'm saying often in those things is very true. Maybe I'm not 100% true, but mm-hmm. It's closer to truth than you'll get in a lot of places. And it's definitely got a sort of spiritual, esoteric, how else can I say it? Psychedelic, and sort of barbaric masculine outlook, let's say. Mm-hmm. So that's me trying to explain it. I don't know. I really should have thought of that and had like a nice few sentences. Sorry, but I haven't really tried to. But like I said, like you were saying earlier about branding, this is why I hate branding. Because really what it boils down to, it's like whatever I want and whatever I want to do in the moment. And, I'm not a genius, but I at least can collate my thoughts and ideas together and centralize them around a feeling I have, which is really born from my instinct more than anything else, and me learning to obey my instinct after and not being affected by the social influence so much. Mm-hmm. So in the end, it's just me and my ideas. That's why when you do branding and you worry about saying or doing something because it might affect your branding or be off brand, see, I don't like that. And that's unnatural and not archaic thinking. So there's a certain energy there, which is instinctual and hard to pinpoint in a description like that. Mm-hmm. And so that makes it hard. But maybe I could probably do a better job. Maybe next time someone asks me that, I'll try to be prepared with something that is short and coherent. But it's the best I can do.
You're good. I think that encompassed a lot of it based on what I see from everything that you post. So I think it's great. Well, where can people find out more about you, find your book, and all of that?
Everything's on the aureuspress.com, aureus, AUREUS -press.com. And obviously I'm on Twitter, Aureus Press. You can look it up, I think. Although I'm not sure if I have a search ban. I did for a while. I might be gone now. And there's a Facebook page that's I still update, even though I never even check it. It's still pretty big on there, though it hasn't grown for years. But there's an Instagram, which is I don't really check either. I've just started that. Mm-hmm. But like the website is the main thing, and there's the book is The Decline and Fall of Western Art is on Amazon.
Awesome, wonderful. Well, I'll link up to all of that in the show notes. And I really appreciate you coming on the Conversation of Our Generation, Brendan. It was a great conversation. So thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Conversation of Our Generation. I think it was a really fun episode. If you want to find out more, definitely head over to conversationofourgeneration.com to be able to watch the full episode. You can see the interview and everything as well. And so definitely go over there to check that out. And just all you have to do is subscribe for just $2 a month to be able to do that. And you can, if you have any issues, definitely go to conversationofourgeneration.com/contact. Let me know and I will help you solve any of those problems, because I don't want to make that hard on you, but definitely go over and check that out. And furthermore, you can go to conversationofourgeneration.com/podcast or just wherever you find podcasts and follow or subscribe there. Leave a good rating and review to keep up with everything that's going on and make sure that other people can find it as well. And you can find me on Twitter at @ConOfOurGen. You can find the Aureus Press at trad_west_art. And you can also just find him by going to Aureus, searching Aureus Press on really any social media, or going to aureus-press.com to find out more about what he's working on there as well. So thank you for listening to this episode of The Conversation of Our Generation. Let's get the dialogue going. Talk to you next time.